Uncle, I have to go home. Let me go home. Please let me go home. Mom will be waiting. She will be worried. You can't go home because you have more studies to do. Sit down and study. Uncle made me sit on his lap again and started rubbing his hand on my chest. Uncle slowly started moving his hand down, and as soon as I saw him, Uncle's hand was on mine. I was your age. I started my speech with a preface, and today for the first time I was mentioning the Day of Judgment. My maternal uncle and paternal uncle were not literate and wealthy like your maternal uncle and paternal uncle. We had a small, ramshackle house. We were their only child. My maternal uncle was often sick and I didn't know what was wrong with him. My father was not home all day. He would come after I went to bed at night. And when I went to school in the morning, he would be a pig. My maternal uncle was very worried about my growth, which your maternal uncle is worried about for your studies. My maternal uncle had not studied. That's why she knew the cost of it. How was she paying my school fees? I knew that. That's why I valued education, and I was studying with great difficulty because I also ran away from studies like you. The only difference was that my maternal uncle worked in the houses, sewed clothes, worked hard day and night to earn money for me, while her health was very bad. School expenses, tuition expenses and madrasa fees. She earned all this in front of my eyes with blood and sweat, while you are lucky in that you have not suffered the pain of seeing your mother working hard. While I have seen this pain, I have seen my mother working in a dying state, when she should have been resting. I have seen her working in people's houses, and you say I don't understand. Well, it was my last year of school like you, and I was happy that after that I would not have to study. I would miss my studies because my father and Mullah had nothing to teach me further, so here I was happy that I would be my mother's support. It was during the last days of school that I met your father. Like you, I also had no friends and I used to run away from people, but due to your father's efforts, we became friends, and when love developed, I don't know. He is a good man, but do you know? He was an orphan. He grew up in an orphanage. Do you know this pain? Parents are deaf and go to school in the morning and work at a mechanic's shop in the evening. And earn money by adding coins one by one to build a future. Today you look at us and say you haven't seen anything. We don't understand your mental state, while we both have come to our own places fighting for our own. Have you ever seen pure and sacred relationships fall from your eyes? Let me tell you, just like on normal days, I went to school and your father was also there. On my way back from school, I used to go to Qari Sahib's house for tuition, and on my way back from tuition, I respected him a lot. I considered him my father's place. He was very respectable to me. I used to study with him until 7 in the evening. That day too, it was 7 o'clock and I wanted to go home, but something was feeling strange. Qari Sahib was talking to someone on the phone and was constantly worried. Then, when he hung up, his face was unusually serious. I said, "Okay, Qari Sahib, it's time. I'm going." He must have been between 50 and 56 years old. He lived alone. The children were all outside the country. There was no doctor or anything. His wife had passed away some time ago. So, my mother requested him to teach me. He agreed with great difficulty, and like this, Mir Asara used to spend his days studying. Now tell me, can you understand this torture? I used to go to study at one place after another all day long, not going home. Mama used to waste time, and even on holidays she kept me out of the house. Sometimes she would go to someone's house to work instead of her own, and she would return with the same person in the evening. Have you seen this torture? That you don't want to do one thing but you are doing the same thing all day, all month and all year. No holidays. Think about how depressed I would be, and I was keeping it inside me. I could hardly get 2 meals a day. Breakfast with stale bread in the morning and just 1 meal a day at night, and being hungry all day long. That day when Qari Sahib got a phone call, he kept me sitting till 8 o'clock, and I was worried that I was worrying myself. I have to go home. Qari Sahib's attitude was so harsh that he started tormenting me. I tried to run away from there, but he grabbed my hand and locked me in the room in a way that I couldn't win. And he had to lock me in the room, and he wanted to lock me in the room that my heart was going out. I sat by the door of the room and started crying. Around 10 o'clock, someone opened the door as usual, and I ran from there while showing them, and opened the outside door and entered the house. But today, to my surprise, the door was open, which I closed, and my mother was waiting for me. She wasn't doing anything. She had fallen asleep. My heart sank. Is there such a mother? The next day I didn't want to go there. I was angry. I didn't tell my uncle what happened. He locked me in my room, and how I managed to escape. That day I came home from school and my uncle handed me over to my uncle while crying. Today the same thing happened. I wanted to go home at 7 o'clock and he locked me in my room again. I was weak and couldn't fight him. As soon as I opened the door at 10 o'clock, I would run away from there like a prisoner who gets water from a death sentence. It became a daily occurrence that I felt like this every day, and most days would pass. When I went home, food would be on my bed in my room, and the atmosphere would be like everyone was asleep, and I was so tired from the whole day that I didn't even realize I was getting a bed. I tried to talk to my uncle and said that I don't want to study at Qari Sahib's house. He doesn't let me come home. I don't understand why he does this. I told my uncle before going to school that Qari Sahib is not a real person. The matter was not yet over when Mama slapped me and held my face and said that I am not ashamed to accuse a weak man. Her hands were rising on me and her tongue was spewing poison like your own tongue. She was saying that that elderly person is taking your responsibility at this age, protecting you, and what words are you uttering about him? I have heard many things that day, and my mama passed judgment on me without listening to a single word of mine, that my words would be wrong. That day I went to school in this condition, and everyone saw me and everyone understood that I had come after getting beaten. Many girls in the class had made fun of me. Everyone was laughing, and there was only one boy who was looking at me with sad eyes. No one moved forward, but he got up from his seat and took me out of the class and fixed my hair and gave me water. That day we both came into everyone's eyes. New chapters of suffering opened here. The days that were hard for me also became a punishment. Everyone in the school was doing their part. The teacher was different. She used to talk a lot. She would bring up the topic of modesty in every lesson, and the girls and boys in the class would tease us. On the other hand, no one at home was ready to listen to us, and Qari Sahib's daily routine kept me up till 10 o'clock for no reason. I was 16 years old, the same age as you. I knew the cold and hot of the times. I was aware of the dirty intentions of people, but I couldn't leave the madrasa. No one at home was listening. That school was over. It was just papers, and my holidays were over. When I came home and told this, my mother at home got me a job at a sewing center and said, "Do a part-time job and study and do madrasa at the same time. I won't be home without a job." I was watching my mother's condition, which was deteriorating day by day, and I was very worried about what had happened. Every day, she would ask, Today it fell in such and such a place. Yesterday it fell in such and such a place. She was very worried and remained confused, and I had no contact with your father. While going to the sewing center, I met your father. One day, I was absent the whole day without telling him. I was with him. We both told each other the whole story from beginning to end. He found my life and circumstances confusing just as I found my life and circumstances confusing. We both decided that we would spend our lives together. I insisted that I have no faith in life. Marry me today. You have no one before you and no one behind you. My father and mother are no one except me. But they are both strange. It is going to be a whole year and I have not seen my father's face. I don't know what kind of job I do and my mother doesn't worry. Do you have any idea how strange Kari Sahib is adopting? I am forced to go to his house. If I go home before time, my mother won't let me in and Kari Sahib keeps me sitting in front of his eyes till 10 o'clock. I will go crazy. If you want to marry me, do it now. Let's go to the mosque with me. Otherwise, let me stay. Don't make excuses for later. There was a lot of argument with your father there. After so much discussion, I refused to get married and finally, due to my stubbornness, he said, meet me tomorrow at the same place. Today I will arrange for a matchmaker or a cleric and witnesses, and I will also arrange for the conditions of the marriage. I agreed to this and agreed to meet me at the same place the next day and left my mother. When I was engaged, Kari Sahib had many children, but after me, he had no one. I used to hear strange things from the people of the neighborhood because most of the people had seen me leaving there at night. Now, as I was coming and going, even the boys started flirting. The next day, I reached the place he had told me at the right time, but he did not come. I waited until the sun rose during the day. He did not come the next day either. I waited the next day too. I also waited the day after that. And like this, I spent a month. The matriculation papers were completely on my head and I started waiting every day and I became desperate. Hopelessness had dug its claws into my heart and I broke your father's promises. I was homeless even after I got home. My mother would throw me out in the morning and wouldn't let me enter the house before 10 o'clock at night. She wouldn't let me enter the house before 10 o'clock at night. I didn't even think that I was a girl. I became a bit arrogant, so I also became careless. Then I went back to the streets and started looking for a job. I couldn't find any work. In fate, there were more trials. I was called a stray girl. I was all hopeless from your father. Now I could only be found at Kari Sahib's house. I would go to the factory in the morning to work and stay at Kari Sahib's house from 6 o'clock in the evening to 10 o'clock at night. I would do his housework and cook his food. He was now sick. Seeing his condition, I thought he would burn to death. And that was how it was. One day when I went to his house, I found the door open. I entered by knocking on the door and greeted him like a day. At the same time, I started sweeping the house and then preparing food. It was better than sitting here for hours to think about what I should take care of him. I ate. I made it and called him. Today there was silence in his house. Otherwise, whenever I would come home, he would greet me with greetings and ask how I was. Today, there was no response to my greeting or call. I entered his room by knocking on the door, and the sky fell on his head. He was lying on the floor of the room. I went out while selling and gathered people by knocking on the doors of the neighborhood. They took him to the hospital. It turned out that he had suffered a heart attack. He was buried. When his children came, it turned out that he had left his house in my name and had made all the arrangements. I had reaped the fruits of my patience. I was homeless while I was at home and an orphan even though I had relations. Now my routine was that I would go to work in the morning and sew clothes. I would get 300 rupees for a suit in the factory, which was a lot for me. I would go home and give half the money to my mother and come back on my own. I started saving money so that I could study further. Very soon, I understood the value of education. By reading and writing, I could make a place for myself. Qari Sahib, many stories were spread about me and him in the world, which were not true, but I did not work on these things, there was no benefit. I cried for my livelihood. Allah had kept me busy day and night. I was busy all day long. At the same time, I got admission in college and work was going on at the same time. I also got a promotion. I tried to get my mother treated in the factory, but she did not agree. I had not seen my father for many years. Thus I got an admission and I passed the 12th standard. I started doing designing courses and many other things. I worked very hard. I stopped listening to people. I put the thought of your father out of my heart that this love does not leave anywhere. My mother did not have any sympathy for my father. One day, when I came home from work, I found that my father's body was in a morgue. When I reached there, I found the police officers. After searching my whole life, it was found that my father was associated with a gang that used to send drugs and he himself was addicted to drugs. Due to the combination of drugs, his death has occurred. I arranged for his shroud from there. After Qari Sahib's death, it was the second experience of such a death. That's why I didn't cry, but the storm was inside. In the same condition, I arranged for his shroud and from there, I gave him a final bath, wrapped him in a shroud and took him home. It was here that I met your father for the second time. Now I had taken control of myself a lot. That's why I never felt sad seeing him. My friend, that's why I accepted his grief and took Papa to his final resting place. The whole neighborhood was standing at home. Some were spitting, some were regretting, some were sighing. I was very depressed. As soon as the burial was over, everyone went to sleep after eating. I could still hear the wailing behind me. As people were coming to meet me, it was already dirty. Mama was also blowing smoke from the saloon. Now I began to understand why Qari Sahib used to keep me at home. I can't get angry with him. I left there quietly. I had kept all my belongings at Qari Sahib's house. Goes home less often. I still had many questions to ask my mother. The next day, when I opened my eyes, I asked her for breakfast. She said, "There is a dead body at home." My routine of asking about my mother's health had started. I hired a maid to keep her busy. Here, I took admission in the future. Only your parents came to meet me there to study. But they never mentioned marriage, and that was the best. We were both trying to improve our own conditions. I had no complaints, nor did I regret anything in my life. I knew that as I was working hard and moving forward, everyone would be doing their own thing according to their own strength. I had no complaints from my father either. Whatever he did, I fulfilled my duty as a daughter and I am still doing it today. I pray for his forgiveness. There was no doubt from my mother as to why she did not involve me in all these things. Why did she not tell me the reason for keeping me away from home? They did all this for my own good. If I could have been my parents, I would have been able to do it. If I had become involved in the turmoil between the two, and had known the issues that my mother had hidden from me, my personality would have been distorted today. I would not have been here in front of you, nor would I have been sitting here explaining to you. I would have become indifferent to you like my mother, and you would have continued to walk as if I had grown up. But don't let that happen. My mother herself gave me light by living in the dark, and today I am trying to give you the same light. I did my master's degree and completed my degree, and my mother also left this world. I was the only girl among them. I started a government job and kept myself busy. I was in touch with your father. One day, his message came. He was embarrassed. What did he say to me? I needed to travel, and he had grown up like me, pushed around and had no bad past. Although there was poverty, I did not get time to have love affairs. Many places had bad reputations, but there was no truth in them. Anyone could have known this, especially those who lived with me. But I will never advise you that you should also marry a man who tells you everything about you. This was my story. This was my character. It is not necessary that you are my daughter, so you also have the same story. No, you have a glimpse of me in you, but your story of Carrie is not the same. Then I returned Kari Sahib's house to his children because I needed it earlier, so I kept it. Now why am I greedy for 2 houses? That is why I returned 1 house to his children. After preparing the papers and marrying your father, I came to his flat and looked at the house that was my ancestral home. Look, where a school has just been built and your father and I are teaching orphans together. Look, this is life. We did not bring anything to your knowledge to protect you from everything. But you felt that perhaps we have lived a great life and are not giving you that life. You have to see all this. You have to prepare yourself. No one will help you. You explain yourself. Take the time tonight and see what you have done and what you want to do next. What kind of life do you want? With a purpose or a meaningless life without a purpose? Do you think it is right for you? Decide. I am with you.